Politics is another major issue in football, and of course something that has developed over time. With football deriving from mob football in the 14th century, where democracy had not yet been established, there was a much lesser involvement of politics in football back then in comparison to now, where we have democracy and where we have all these different cultures and nationalities playing against each other. If we look at other sports, however, you can see that politics has always had a massive involvement in sport in general. So whether that's Olympics, whether that's other sports such as American football, as a recent example, there's always been an involvement of politics, especially on a national level, due to the differing cultures and different ideologies of those nationalities. If we go back to the Olympics of 1936, for example, so the Berlin Olympics, obviously in Germany, that was a massive political statement for Germany. Germans took that as an opportunity to spread their Nazi ideologies and their Nazi views at that level, at a national level, where different nationalities and different countries are competing against each other. All of those countries were competing in a country where Nazi ideologies were prominent, where they originated from, of course. So all of those countries that had gone over to participate in the Berlin Olympics were exposed to those Nazi ideologies, and it was almost seen as a chance to promote those ideologies by the Germans at the time. Obviously, Nazi ideologies included the idea that Jewish, black people, and gay people were inferior to the Aryan race. And the Aryan race was, of course, Germans that were blonde and had blue eyes. They were seen as the superior race by the leader at the time, that was, of course, Adolf Hitler. So the Berlin Olympics were seen as an opportunity for Hitler and the Nazis to display how superior that Aryan race was. It was a chance to put athletes that had blonde hair and blue eyes on the main stage, with the aim, of course, for them to be successful in the Olympics. It was a chance for them to promote that Aryan race, I suppose, in a way. So obviously this is a massive involvement of politics in sport, and it's not something that only occurred in that Olympics. In many Olympics in the future there has been this involvement of politics. So you've got the 1972 Olympics in Munich, where terrorism occurred. Obviously that is a massive political statement as well. Terrorism is nearly all of the time to do with politics, whether that's religion or whether that's other ideologies. Terrorism is a massive political statement, and for that to occur on a main stage, on a national stage, is a massive political statement. The 1980 Olympics as well, so there, in that situation, there was a boycotting of the Olympics. So America boycotted the Olympics in Russia, and Russia tried to cover up this boycotting, of course, because it would have had a negative impact on Russia's image, I suppose. Of course, the aim of this boycott was to protest the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and of course the Soviet Union were hosting the 1980 Summer Olympics. So this was a massive political statement by the USA, and they were actually followed by a few other countries as well in boycotting the Olympics. And this political statement did transfer over to the later 1984 Olympics as well. So these Olympics were held in Los Angeles, which was of course in America. So the Soviet Union and its allies later boycotted the 1984 Summer Olympics as a result of that previous boycotting in 1980. It's this massive back and forth boycotting between the Soviet Union and the USA, of course, around that sort of time of the Cold War and everything, whilst Russia was the Soviet Union, of course. All of these political statements, again, are on that national stage where all of these different nationalities and all of the different cultures are exposed to this sporting stage. Everyone's watching. So everyone is seeing these political statements. Perhaps it might persuade a few opinions in a certain way and a few other opinions in a different direction. Even as recent as the 2012 Olympics in London, there were still protests in that Olympics as well. Protests against China due to their poor human rights. So there was human rights activism around that time, all again to do with politics. And politics seems to have an increasing stage in sport as time goes on and as there are more political disagreements and more political uproar as times change, of course. Even later than that, in 2014, in the Winter Olympics, President at the time of America, President Obama boycotted the Winter Olympics in 2014 as they were held in Russia, and Russia actually had issues with homophobia, and they obviously still have issues with homophobia to the present day. But Obama actually sent openly gay athletes to compete in those Winter Olympics as a political statement. Again, obviously, he's used sport and sporting events, major sporting events, as a way to make this political statement. And perhaps some of the most recent cases of politics in sport is in the NFL. So obviously there was the Take a Knee campaign in the NFL, which is obviously occurring in America, where players did not stand for their national anthem. So the national anthem is usually played before an NFL game, and players did not stand for the national anthem. This was a stand against racism, as they found that Donald Trump was racist, and players did not want to stand for the national anthem when there were issues against racism, and they didn't want to stand for something where America is in a state where racism is so prevalent. So they took a knee, and there was a massive controversy around it. There was a lot of support by celebrities, but also, of course, the president himself took it very negatively and spoke openly about it, and very negatively towards these players, saying that they should have been fired, using words that perhaps cannot really be repeated about these players, saying that they're not welcome at the White House because of their actions. Of course, this was a massive political statement again, players using their platform, their sporting platform, as a way to reach a political audience. So, of course, from this you can see that politics has a massive place in sport at the moment, in general, not just specific sports. All across the sporting industry, in different sports, politics has a massive involvement, and that involvement is increasing as more political issues arise. Obviously, my focus here is on politics in football, and there are many political issues in football at the moment to discuss. Now, you've got the obvious political issue of FIFA corruption. That's the obvious first thing that comes to mind when you are discussing politics in football. It's the most talked about, I would say anyway. But there are also many specifics within football as well, whether that's to do with politics on a national level, whether it's to do with gender, whether it's to do with racism, religion. There are so many different types of politics to be discussed within football, and so many different statements that have been made by different players and different teams to do with politics. And it's more of a discussion as to whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. Is there a place for politics in football, or should it be completely eradicated from the sport? So, of course, you have instances of players displaying their individual political views, something which they are always punished for. So, for example, ex-Liverpool striker Robbie Fowler was fined £900 in 1997 for revealing an undershirt displaying support for striking Liverpool dock workers. So obviously, in 1997, that was a massive political issue at the time. And through Fowler's showing of support for those workers, he was obviously condemned for that, and punished for showing his political views, whether they were right or wrong. There's rules within the sport where you are not allowed to show your political views. Another more recent issue is with Pep Guardiola, or also with Barcelona as a club. So Pep Guardiola actually wore a yellow ribbon in his press interviews at games to symbolise his support for Catalonian independence. He obviously wore it in support of Catalan activists and politicians imprisoned in Spain since the banned independence referendum. He was later fined by the FA for £20,000. Now, FIFA states that no political, religious or personal slogans, statements or images are allowed in the sport. So he was obviously fined for this, for showing his support for something that is very close to him, something that he supports as an individual. Should he be fined for this? There's a very blurred line there, really, especially in relation to where FA actually takes a stance. The FA took no stance on political statements such as rainbow laces, that was actually endorsed by the FA, or wearing poppies on kit, that's allowed. It's a consideration of, is that a political statement or is it not? I know in Ireland there was some debate around it, as the poppies had a different meaning. Where do you draw the line on what is a political statement and what isn't a political statement? What is allowed and what isn't allowed? Should rainbow laces and poppies have been allowed? There's a kind of blurred line there. In addition to this, there was a massive political statement surrounding Barcelona Football Club. So Barcelona closed their stadium on the 1st of October 2017 after a controversial referendum on independence. So the same one that Pep Guardiola was symbolising his support for with that yellow ribbon. So they had a controversial referendum on independence, during which several violent clashes between police and voters took place. Barcelona shut their stadium to the public in condemnation of the alleged use of brutality by national security forces against citizens. This was a massive political statement, as it meant Barcelona was playing without any support. It's a massive effect on the sport due to the politics surrounding the club at the time and surrounding football at the time. Should that politics have been involved with the club, involved with football as a sport? Obviously, this is a very specific scenario, as Barcelona is a predominantly Catalonian support system, most of its supporters are Catalonian, so they're going to be in favour of that independence, which is why that political statement was made by the club. But it does also have fans that aren't Catalonian.